Welcome to R&R Livin' Life. In this episode, Rick and I make our way back through Normanton and take the Burketown Road to Burke Wills Camp 119 on the Boyno River, check out the floodplains around the Flinders River crossing, and return to Normanton, where we do some more exploring before returning to Karumba to watch the sunset over the Gulf. The early morning light certainly gave a new perspective to the road and the landscape. As we made our way back across the Karumba plains, I had thought I had seen a lot of brolgas yesterday, but this morning, wow, the numbers were even greater than yesterday. Breeding pairs and flocks were distributed across the floodplains. I was even lucky enough to see a jabiru this morning beside a flock of pelicans in one of the waterholes along the side of the road. The vast plains had a golden look about them this morning, reflecting the amount of natural pasture cover, a result of a good wet season they had had earlier in the year. Not only were there flocks of brolgas, but we could see cattle grazing across the plains, looking in good condition, a sign of good grazing management, as grazing relies on understanding how the grasses, trees, soils, grazing animals, and climate affect each other. Healthy land and soil biology results in good grazing country. Rice grass, bluegrass and brown-top grass and saltwater couch are some of the plant species found across the landscape. Along some of the mud flats, ground cover gave the ground the look of having a green fuzz over it, while in other places the salt build-up was obvious. In some places where channels had washed, erosion was occurring. With many of the causeways and creeks across the plain subject to tidal influences, it was easy to see where the low-lying areas were by the difference in the country. Along the edge of the road were a number of waterholes. However, I was a little disappointed by the lack of bird life, though that is not to say that they weren't there. I had read reports that these roadside waterholes provided rich and diverse bird life, including magpie geese, great egrets, ducks, black-winged stilts, white-necked herons, and even straw-necked ibis. But I didn't see any of these birds other than pelicans, a jabiru, and brolgas. We crossed over Brannigan Creek, a tidal estuary close to the coast, but here, where it crosses Karumba Road, the waterholes were still filled with crystal-clear water. Some of the floodways here are kilometres long, even built up in places, but are still subject to flooding by some of the debris we saw piled up in places. We stopped in at Walker's Creek to check it out. What a peaceful place. The road down to the cement causeway was quite washed out, and I can only imagine what it would be like now after the floods that are currently happening in the area. I was impressed by the hairs on the paper bark tree, a melaleuca, apparently a sign of new growth, but I wondered if it had something to do with having been inundated by floodwaters and was there to protect the thick papery bark. The green, yellow and red flood markers really stood out as we drove across a number of floodways and rivers. They really are a bright way for travellers to identify the height of water, though there would be no way in the world I would be driving through water anywhere near the green level, especially after seeing the depth of some of the rivers we had crossed and knowing just how much water is needed to make the lower part of the green. As we crossed the Muttonbird wetlands, I was again lucky enough to see a jabiru, or black-necked stork. This large endangered long-legged bird stands up to 1.3 metres and features a striking iridescent purple-green neck, black-banded wings, and a massive thick black bill, and has coral red legs. Female birds have a yellow eye, while males have a dark-coloured iris, but I was unable to get close enough to see whether they were male or female. These birds are the only stork species in Australia, being carnivorous, feeding on fish, frogs, crabs and snakes in shallow waters up to 30 centimetres deep. They are known for being territorial and are often solitary or found in a pair rather than in large flocks. As we reached the outskirts of Normanton, we stopped in at the Fred Pascoe Community Fishing Place to check out the Norman River. With more than 200 cattle stations scattered across the Gulf country, pastoralism remains Normanton's economic mainstay. But tourism has become a growth industry for the town, especially those that like fishing, and what a place to fish off the bridge. The Norman River flows through long stretches of tropical forest with many cattle stations along its length. The township of Normanton is about 90 kilometres from its mouth, and it is said can be reached by small ships. The river catchment is over 50,000 square kilometres. I took a walk up towards the wetlands to see if I could get a better photo of the jabiru, and came across a pair of brolgas, a member of the crane family. Unfortunately, the jabiru didn't like me getting too near, so flew away. We continued on through Normanton to the Burketown Road, where we continued west for about 30 kilometres. The road from Normanton to Burketown, part of the Savannah Way, is approximately a 230 kilometre stretch that is mostly sealed bitumen. While generally in good condition, it is subject to severe flooding and damage, especially near the Leichhardt River crossing, about 50 kilometres upstream from the river mouth at the Gulf. Our journey today will take us to Little Boyno and the Flinders Rivers, as we had no intention of making it all the way to Burketown, and were only interested in Camp 119 and the floodplains between the Boyno and the Flinders Rivers. The lush grasslands and woodlands of eucalypts, melaleucas and acacias covered the landscape of plains and river channels, comprising clay and alluvial soils, with grass in some places higher than the boat. The country was certainly having a good season. The beef industry in the area is based on native grassland pastures, and consequently the region has experienced very little clearing of native vegetation compared to more eastern bioregions. Once again we saw cattle in good condition. In small sections of the road, particularly in low-lying areas or where water had crossed the road, there was minor damage, but on the whole the road was in good condition. Just before Little Boyno River was the turn-off south to Burke Wills Camp 119, also known as Walker's Camp, after Frederick Walker, leader of a search party to find Burke Wills in 1862. He had arrived in the area 11 months after Burke Wills, and also established a camp on a small seasonal lagoon in the area. The 2 kilometres of sealed windy road, crossing a couple of causeways that had in places been washed away, was in good condition, though I wouldn't have liked to pass an oncoming caravan. We parked in the car park and read the interpretive panels in the area before walking 300 metres to the blazed trees of Camp 119. In 1861, Burke Wills established Camp 119, their most northerly camp of their ill-fated expedition to cross the Australian continent from south to north. They established their camp adjacent to Boyno River. Leaving 2 of their party camped at the location, Burke Wills ventured further north in an attempt to reach the Gulf Coast, but were impeded by mangroves and boggy terrain. During their occupation of the site, the remaining members of the party blazed 15 trees to mark the location of their camp. These trees are located within the fringe of bush around the site. The blazing is unimposing, but we could only find a couple of numbered trees, as others seem to have been lost due to flooding and droughts. This remote site evokes the sense of isolation of the Burke Wills expedition in 1861, and it is important to remember that this site is on private land. The campsite had faded from public memory for near on 50 years, until staff from the nearby Magari station found Walker's blazed trees and the blazed trees at Camp 119 in 1909. The Carpentaria Shire Council has erected interpretive signage, bollards, to help protect the site, along with a shelter and a designated car park. The interpretive signage, though, showed signs of having been burnt, so was very difficult to read. After appreciating Camp 119, we made our way back to Boyno River, also called Little Boyno River, an arm of the Flinders River Delta that flows into the Gulf of Carpentaria. As one of Queensland's longest rivers, the Flinders offers insight into Australia's ancient past and continues to serve as a critical resource for the region today. The Flinders River's journey through time began millions of years ago, when much of inland Australia, including parts of Queensland, was submerged beneath the vast Eromanga Sea. This ancient inland sea existed during the Cretaceous period, leaving behind a landscape rich in marine fossils, minerals, and distinct geological features. As the Eromanga Sea receded, it contributed to the unique geology of the area. The river carved channels and gorges over millions of years, such as the nearby Porcupine Gorge north of Hughenden, where layers of rock reveal the ancient seabed. As the Boyno is an anabranch, a channel that diverges from the main channel, having high earth banks containing deep pools, providing distinct calmer habitats compared to the main river, before it rejoins further downstream, I have included it together with the Flinders. The Flinders River is fed by the Saxby and Cloncurry rivers and seasonally drains over 107,000 square kilometres. The European discovery of the Flinders River occurred in 1841, when Captain Wickham and Lieutenant John Lort Stokes of HMS Beagle surveyed and charted the estuary, naming it in honour of the famed British explorer Matthew Flinders. Following the explorers Burke and Wills, settlers moved into the region, driven by the pastoral potential of the land. James Gibson was the first pastoralist to establish cattle stations along the Flinders in 1861, founding Prairie Station. By 1864, Gibson and other settlers expanded further, establishing Malungra and Taldora stations, which still operate today, with the riverine lands, particularly near the Gulf, now used in particular for raising cattle. The Flinders features dynamic ecosystems shaped by heavy seasonal flooding, supporting extensive saline mudflats, mangrove forests, coastal grasslands, and melaleuca woodlands. After checking out the floodplains, the Burketown side of the Flinders River, we made our way back to Normanton. Just outside of Normanton, we went and checked out the Normanton Showgrounds Camp Draft Arena, bringing back memories of yesteryears. We spent time watching a young horse being put through its paces, learning to draft. From the showgrounds, we then went and had a look at the Normanton Railway Station, a heritage-listed railway station built in 1889. At its peak, the complex at Normanton consisted of a station building containing a telegraph office, station master's and traffic manager's office, clerk's room, waiting room, parcels and cloak room, booking office, and a ladies' room with a ramp to ladies-only earth closets. We made our way to Normanton Wharf, where some of the original sections of the old wharf still stood, though much of which had been wrecked by a flood in 1974, and the modernised boat ramp, which had had a winter-operated punt from the 1880s to 1965. After the recent floodings, I am unsure of what remains of the old wharf. This would be our third time travelling this section of the road, and each time there was always something that catches our eye. Seeing the wetlands from a different angle seemed to show more each time, as this time round we saw magpie geese, ducks, and a juvenile brolga, as did the Karumba Plains offer something new each time. The time of day seemed to have some effect on what it highlighted in the landscape. What a day we have had so far, exploring some of the history and geology of the area, but there was something more I was looking forward to. Later that afternoon, we made our way up to the Sunset Tavern, perched on the edge of the Gulf of Carpentaria at the beachside Karumba Point, where we watched a cruise making its way out into the Gulf. While waiting for the sun to set, we enjoyed a superb tea of barra and chips. As the sun sunk lower into the horizon, we moved out overlooking the beach, where we did a bit of seabird spotting. The photographs I have kept in sequence they were taken, even though some may seem to be out of sequence. I have not changed the order I took them in. I had heard that the sunsets were something to look forward to, but what a jaw-dropping sunset! The sunset that graced the skies above Karumba were nothing short of magnificent, with the colours of the sinking sun amazing. We were treated to a spectacle that painted the horizon with vibrant hues as the sun began its descent towards the horizon. The sky transformed into a canvas of red, pinks and purple tones before turning blackish, with a fiery orange backdrop casting a mesmerising glow across the ocean, setting the tranquil waters ablaze with its reflection. In every direction the colours changed as the sun sank lower and lower. The vast expanse of the ocean provided an unobstructed view, allowing the sun's radiant colours to stretch across the horizon. I will let you decide if it was worth it. As the sun slipped below the horizon, there was a quiet that filled the scene. It is hard to describe just how emotional seeing the sunset can make you feel. Even the birds were quiet for just that short time between the sun sitting just above the horizon and then disappearing. The close of another day. Rick and I will leave you here as we enjoy the changing colours of the sunset and soak up the sense of wonder, peace, reflection and closure of another day finishing. What a wonderful couple of days we have had here on the Gulf, especially as we are not fisher people. Join us next episode as we make our way to Croydon, where we spend another couple of interesting days. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed our look around this part of the country. Cheers for now. Live life to the full. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.